into it. I will present on the topic of getting started with custom connector for Power Automate. Let's first introduce myself. So, as mentioned, Bendik Bergman, my name. I'm working as a Power Platform consultant for CRM Consultana in Stockholm. Moved here 4 years ago, coming from Germany. And there I started as a .NET developer, added some Angular, and then it was like a bit on and off with Dynamics on-premise back then. And when I then moved to Sweden, it was just Dynamics, CRM, CE, model-driven apps, and Power Platform. Here are also my contact information. So if you want to reach out, if you have any questions or suggestions, then just reach out to me, Twitter, LinkedIn, mail, or on my blog. So what's in for the session today? So first of all, I have some slides, but I want to go to the demo really fast. So it may be like 5 or 6 minutes in PowerPoint, and then we will take a look at different demos I prepared. So first of all, we want to talk about what are custom connectors, then which components are in those, how could one create custom connectors, which types are there, and use cases. After that, we go into the demonstration, and at the end, I have also some limitations when it comes to custom connectors. So what are custom connectors? You know that we have like 600 plus connectors for Power Automate at the moment, and those basically wrap around a different API, different ones, for example, Twitter API or DocuSign API or Dataverse for that matter. So a custom connector is basically nothing else. It's also just a wrapper around an API so that Power Automate can integrate or request this API. It can have triggers or actions from this API. And why would you do that? To minimize complexity and increase productivity, basically. So if you have a custom connector, a citizen developer can request the API it's made for and doesn't need a developer to do so. So you don't need to write C# or TypeScript or whatever to request some API. It can just be done by basically anyone. And that's basically also the reason why some should or could create a custom connector. So which components do we have inside of custom connector? And we will take a look at that later in the demo as well. First of all, you have like the general information, name, host URL, base path within the URL, and a description, and what else? A color for the icon. You can choose a background color for the icon. The second thing is security. You can have either none or an API key, for example, or OAuth 2. There's one more. We can take a look at that later. And then if you, for example, use OAuth, you have different like sub-security configurations. It could be a generic OAuth. It could be from GitHub or Azure Active Directory. And there's a bunch of other providers as well. Then you have the third part, which is the main part, I would say. It's the definition, which defines your actions and your triggers and everything else you have, like the response objects and so on. Then you have a preview part, which is code. So you can execute C# code within your connector. But as mentioned, it's a preview feature still, so not meant to be used in production. And we don't go into detail with that one because we are doing a general basic presentation here. And the last tab you have there is to test your connector. So when you have created the connector and saved a new version or whatever, then you can also test it before you release it to some other environment, for example. And the last part, that's why I have a little gap, is you also have like a Swagger editor, which helps a lot in some cases. and you can switch it on and off. So it's not like a own tab, but you can go into it or look at the normal tabs we explained earlier. So there are different methods or how you could create a custom connector. The easiest one, or maybe not the easiest one, but the most straightforward one, is the manual one. So you create a custom connector from a blank canvas, so to say, and then you have to add everything by yourself, all the actions and so on, and all the security stuff. What you also could do is you could do it from an Azure service, and that's in preview. I have never done that before, but maybe we can test it within the demos. We will see how far we come. But it basically, what I understood is you can give it an URL or log into a Azure service a resource, and then it will create an app or custom connector from there. Third one is Open API file, so a Swagger file basically. You could, if you have it on your local machine, you can just upload it, and the custom connector will be created on based on that one. It's basically the same for the Open API URL. So if you have like an Open API definition somewhere for your API you want to integrate to, they normally present or have some definition. Then you can just present the URL and it will create the custom connector from this. Another one is a Postman collection. So if you're using Postman to test the API you want to integrate to, you could create a collection of different endpoints and then save this collection and upload it to the Power Platform and create a custom connector from this collection. And the last one is from GitHub. I haven't used that either. But yeah, you can have a definition or an API on GitHub and then create a custom connector from there, basically. There are different types of custom connectors. One side is for different products. You could create a custom connector for Power Automate, Power Apps, which is Canvas app in this case, and Logic apps. And then you have different types of publishers. So either you create a custom connector, what we are talking about today, those are only used in your organization or any other organization or environment where you deploy it to. But they are not public if you don't have it like on GitHub on an open source project, but normally they are not public. But then the other two are publicly available in the custom connector store, where we have like 600 plus custom connectors at the moment. And there it's either independent publisher, or I haven't found a good name for it, but the normal publisher. And what I mean with that is you could have like some company which have created their publisher by themselves and then have sent it into to like the normal process for Microsoft to get it signed and so on, and get it into the list and publicly available. And this would be like the normal publisher, because the person who is responsible for the API is also responsible for the connector. And then you have something in between. You could have like an independent publisher. Then the person is responsible for the connector, but not the API. And that's basically if there's some open API, it's publicly available from whatever service you want to, and you as an individual or another company create a Power Automate custom connector for it, but the original creator of the API isn't either aware of it or is not maintaining the custom connector, then you're like an independent publisher. What are the use cases for custom connectors? I mentioned it a bit, but the main use cases I have seen so far is either you have like a legacy API and you want to integrate against it, or you have an on-prem API. It could for sure also be an on-prem legacy API, but it could also be like an on-prem system which isn't legacy, so you are still using it full-blown, but it's still on-premise. It could be an internal API, but not on-premise, but in the cloud. So we will take a look at one example of those in the demo. So for example, what I have done several times is the customer had some API to create a unique identifier for either customers or projects throughout their whole ecosystem. So they have one API, and every system who handles customers or projects has to request this one API to get a unique identifier, and then saves it inside of the system. And since the Dynamics or the Power Platform implementation also used customers for those, we also needed to integrate to this API. And then it's neither on-prem or legacy, but it's an internal API just for this customer, and it's hosted on Azure. So this could be a use case as well, and a quite common one, I would say. And then another one could be there is no connector yet. So it's a public API, for example, you want to integrate to it, but there isn't a connector yet. One example what I have is we at CRM Consultant now, we have created a custom connector for integrate to verified. It's a document signing provider, so to say. There is no connector yet within those 600 publicly available connectors, but we had some customers who wanted to integrate to it, so we created a custom connector. So basically, it's not our API, but we are integrating to it. Good. That was everything with my slides already. If there are no questions, I would like to go over to demo directly. I don't see any questions in the chat, so let's do that. Just open the right window. Still in front of everything. Now here we are. Perfect. So let's see. Yeah, we are in my Maker portal on my development environment within our company's tenant. I have created a solution, custom connector demo. I already created some environment variables. We might use those later. But first of all, I wanted to show you the different types you could, or different hows to create a custom connector. So the one I'm usually using is from inside of a solution because I want to deploy those later. So I want to have them inside of a solution. So we could go to new and then more. Where is it? Is it automation? Oh, sorry. Yeah, automation. Custom connector. If you do that, it will create like a blank connector. So not from importing from any file, which I usually do. If you want to import it from, as mentioned, like an OpenAPI file or an OpenAPI URL or whatever, you could go to also either in the Power in the Maker portal to data custom connectors and then new custom connector up here, and then you can choose one of those, or the same in the Flow Power Automate portal. It's also data custom connectors, and then over here it's basically the same site. So you could choose one of those. Yes. So what have I prepared for today? Yeah, so we will create 2 or at least 2 custom connectors. Let's start with the one where we want to create a custom connector against a third-party API. So for this demo, I choose this OMDB API. So it's basically about movies. So you could request it and get all the information for, as they have here, Blade Runner, for example, or any other movie there is. You could get the actors, the ratings, an image, description, and a lot of information you could use in different ways. So we want to create a custom connector to this API so that we can use all the movie information either in a Canvas app later or in a Power Automate flow, for example. So they have an example here. So let's say we want to have like a standard Christmas movie, Die Hard, and maybe open it like here. Oh, no API key. Yes, sure. I have to present that. Where is it? We have it already. Yeah, so now here we are. Yeah, let's just copy that. So that's the response. Let's just copy that to a proper JSON editor. Over. So here we have like the response. It's the title, the year, which rating it is, release date, runtime, and so on and so forth. And yeah, ratings. Yeah, a bunch of information about this movie. As you can see here, to request this, that's the arrow here. I need an API key. I have created that one earlier, so we'll just add it to see whether or not it's working. And API key, here we are. Yeah. So if I'm using my API key and send it into within this URL here, then I will get some response and I can basically search for whatever I want to. Yeah, we leave it with that. So let's create a custom connector against this API. Yeah, so I have created a custom connector from my solution. When I do that, it opens a new window within the Power Automate portal and says here like a little message, you're currently creating a custom or creating a new custom connector. And when I'm done, I can click on done and then it will refresh the list and the custom connector will appear here. So let's see. Up here, we can define a title, maybe OMDB API, correct. So, and one thing to mention here, when you have saved or created a custom connector once, the name cannot be changed any longer, which is a bit, yeah, but that's how it is. So you could create or upload a custom connector icon so that it will be shown in your in the Power Automate flow as well. Let's see whether or not I have one actually. Let's take just our company icon. And here sometimes I have problems saving that one, but we'll try. Then you can define a background color for the icon. It's HD or CSS or HTML normal color coding. So we will take maybe just white. You can give some description, custom connector for OMDB API to get information about movies. Then you could specify whether or not you want to connect via on-premise data gateway. So if you have like an on-premise API, this might be needed so that you basically connect to the on-premise data gateway, which is installed on your on-premise machine and one on-premise machine, and then connect from there to the API. You could define which whether or not you want to have HTTPS or HTTP at the host and the base URL. So let's find out what the host and the base URL is. The host is just omdbapi.com. Where are we here? And the base URL is just a slash because it's directly here, slash, and then we can have our search parameters. So here it's important, do not write like HTTP or HTTPS in the beginning. It's just DUL without this, because the scheme comes from this those radio buttons up here. So it would not work if I would write like that. Yeah, it will just say, no, it's not working, which is okay, because here I can't even save. But if you're working with different hosts, because usually especially if you're creating a custom connector against an internal API, and we will see that later, but then you have different APIs for different environments as well. So let's say you have a development, test, and production environment in your Power Platform or Dataverse, then you normally also have corresponding APIs from your internal API, because they also need like development, test, and production, and those have different URLs. So when you move your custom connector from one environment to the other, you also want to change the URL, basically. And those URLs can be or will be dynamically. So it's good to remember that you don't, or you're not allowed to have like the HTTPS colon / just the URL here. So that's for the general information. Let's go to security. In our case, as you have seen, we have an API key. So we want to present this. What you can choose is either no authentication, basic authentication, HTTP API key, or OAuth. In some cases, you don't have like, no, maybe I will fuzz a different way, but normally you have like some authentication against an API. That's the standard, but it might be none of those three. It might be something else. In that case, you can, for example, do no authentication and do your authentication in another way, either in your code thing or like having an input parameter, which is a JWT token already, and then you could create it via a custom API in your system. So there are different ways of doing that, but normally one of those three is sufficient. So let's create one with an API key. Water on the mouse. So the parameter name, the users will be required to provide API key. Yeah, exactly. So when they're creating the connection, and we will see that later, they will have to, or they will be needed or required to present an API key, which could be misleading or a bit complex for citizen developers, but you could have it like an environment variable, so they don't have to know the API key. They just have to know which environment variable contains the API key, basically. But for now, we will take API key as the label, and API key should be the parameter name, because that's what it has to be named within the URL up here, API key. So, and then you can choose, should it be located in the header or in the query? In our case, it's the query, so it will be in the URL. In some, depends on how the API is built, but it could either be within the URL or sent as an header in the HTTP request. We need query for now. Then we go to definitions, and here, as you can see, nothing is in here, no actions, no triggers, nothing we could reuse. So we created from scratch now. So we do a new action, and the summary is search. Yeah, there it is. Search title. Search for a movie title, and then we need to present the operation ID, and that's basically in this case, unfortunately, just T. Here. Oh, and then response Yeah, we could so we could do it like that. So we can say yeah, we just write in what we have to do here, but we could also do it import from a sample, and then you would say, okay, it's a get, and then we have the URL. Let's see. We just take this. We don't have any headers, so we do an import, and then it would like generate the request for you. And in this case, T isn't correct, so it's like that. Just. Oh no, sorry. That's the internal operation ID. Search title. So yeah, here we are. So it now created like our request. It's a GET request. The URL is directly to the host we have defined earlier. And then we have a query. We send in T and API key. In this case, API key is for our security and authentication, so we can delete it here. Otherwise, we have it twice. And then, yeah, let's talk about the rest later. Then you have like a response, which is just default because we haven't defined anything yet. So we can just add a new response. And here we can also say import from sample. So we copy this one and then say import, and it will directly say, okay, in the body you have the actor, the award, box office, country, and so on and so forth. And then we go back. So with that, we have like configured one endpoint. We could go further and then maybe configure, get it by ID or whatever endpoints you have in your API. For now, that's fine here. You could add triggers. Those are a bit, so Power Automate requires the API to implement trigger in a certain way to be able to use it here. There are documentation on how it should be built, but the trigger is basically whenever something happens in the system where you're building the API for, it pushes out some notification so that you could create a Power Automate which triggers on that. So you have a real-time integration rather than having Power Automate pull the API every, I don't know, hour or whatever, and ask, are there any updates? So that's like the difference between triggers and actions. So triggers are real-time and actions are more like pulling. So that's a push and that's a pull, so to say. Then you have references. So if you have, like, for example, the response we have defined here, and they will be reused in different endpoints, then you could have it like a reference, and then in the response you just say, okay, this response has an object built like the reference over here. So then if you change it, it changes in every endpoint. Then you have policies. You can like change the behavior of your custom connector. One thing usually done here is the one I mentioned, have different hosts for different APIs in the different environments. You have like test, dev, production. Those were previously or are currently still made with policies. You could create a policy and say, okay, change the host to whatever someone puts into it or into my custom connector or during runtime, so to say. But this can soon be replaced by having the specific URL for your environment in an environment variable. But we will take a look at that later. So let's go ahead to code. As mentioned, that's a preview feature. You can run C# code in here. You can have like whatever function you want to add here, but you need one which is like a task and is execute async, and then you can do some stuff in here. You can't do everything because you obviously don't have access to other DLLs, So you can just do stuff which is in the standard C# and some DLLs which are presented from Microsoft, but it's very basic stuff in here. And then the last thing is, oh yeah, tests for sure. You have to create it before you can test it. But I wanted to show one thing, and that's the Swagger editor over here. So you can switch to the Swagger editor, and then you have everything you have just defined, like in a Swagger YAML format, like title and the URL, the host, the path, and your different endpoints or actions, security, and so on. So this is here, and we will use that for the second connector we'll build. So let's save that. It can take a while in the beginning until the servers are up and running. Here we are. So now you are in the test tab. You have to create a new connection. So we'll do that. It will go over the API key in here. So like that. Create connection, and then we reload. So now we have like a connection over here. And so you could have different connections, like having one for with a service principal, for example, and so on. So it depends on what you want to test. And then you have your endpoint. At the moment, we have just the search title, and the only parameter is T. In this case, it's a bit, yeah, for an end user, maybe that's not very usable what T is, but that's how it has to be to request the API. So we have to live with that. So if you do diehard here, test operations, and then you get the information back in here, and everything looks fine. So later, if you have time, you can try to use that in a real proper Power Automate flow. But when you have requested this one, you can use every of those, like in the dynamic, like this little pop-up. If you have dynamic content and you want to reuse it in the next step, then all of those will be listed as separate stuff coming from the connector. So you don't have to pass the whole JSON to get all the components. It's directly passed for you because we have defined it in the definition. Great. So the first one worked. Pretty straightforward and quite easy connector. Let's go to the second one. So I created a custom or own API. It's just the standard API if you create a .NET Core API. So it's one endpoint, weather forecast. I have to authenticate to test it. Close. So it's just giving me some weather forecast for different locations. I don't even know, or no, one location at different times. I don't even know which location it is, but it doesn't matter. So that's my endpoint. I want to create a custom connector against this one, and again, I will go from my solution here and go to automation custom connector, and then, as I mentioned earlier, this one is now from a blank. It's a blank creation of a custom connector, but I still can use the Swagger definition through the Swagger editor here. So let's see and try to do that. As you can see, it's OpenAPI 3 definition, which is basically Swagger 3, which isn't supported by custom connectors yet. They only support Swagger 2. And that was one question as well in the chat. Do you know if OpenAPI 3 will be supported in the near future? I don't know. I'm not aware of anything, but I hope so. and I do think they have to do that, but I'm not aware of it. So let's see. If we open the definition, you can see up here it's 301. And for sure, I could have developed this one to have present directly a Swagger 2 definition, but usually you want to have like the greatest and latest and want to have the 3 and not go back to something older just because Power Automate doesn't support it, because this API could be used by others as well. So there are ways of changing this one to Swagger 2 definition. And that's what we want to do now. So I copy that link and I try to open my Visual Studio when my computer lets me. Where is it? Here we are. So Visual Studio opened in my folder for the day, and I've installed globally something which is called API spec converter. So what you would do within this one, it's an npm package. So you need Node.js and npm. So we would do something like that, which would install API spec converter globally on your machine. I have already done that. So what we want to do is we basically, here we are. We want to execute the API spec converter. We want to convert from OpenAPI 3 to Swagger 2. And the syntax should be YAML and not JSON, because Power Automate needs YAML. But even if you paste the JSON to the Swagger editor within the Power Automate custom connector, it will transform it to YAML, but it can't handle OpenAPI 3. And then we have the URL from where we need, or from where we take our definition and where we should put it. And in this case, it's just the Swagger JSON. So let's execute that. And there you see the Swagger JSON is already created. And now we have our Swagger in 2.0 and as YAML. So if we go back, just have to find the right. Yeah, here we are. So let's just take some color here. And some title, weather API, and sorry about that, I have to copy my URL as well. Oh, and that's okay. Security, we do it in the next step, but definition, and let's go to the Swagger here. Oh yeah, sure, I have to do that again. Paste it in, it will get some error because the token URL doesn't understand token URL, but it also says structural error and an additional parameter token URL which shouldn't be there. So we delete that. Perfect. Switch back, and here's our endpoint already. So we just have to give it some name and description, and everything else is there already. It came from pasting in the Swagger, and we also have like a reference, which is the weather forecast, which defines like the parameters or the information we get back from the API here. General. Oh yeah, I have to present those again. Sure. And then we come to the interesting part here, security. So my API is authenticating against my company's, or the company I'm working for, tenant or Azure AD with an app registration, and it presents some scope. And then I have a different app registration to use within the custom connector, which has access to the created scope from the API. And what it does then, we will see that when we do the login or we create the connector, it will pop up a login screen where I, as Bendik Bergman, as with my personal account, has to log in and give the API permission to use my account. I have already done that, so you won't see the give permission stuff. But if you would connect or create a connection the first time, it would pop up like this. You know what I mean? This permission. This app needs your permission to read your information, and then you have to accept it. Depends on the configuration of your tenant. It might be that you need an admin to consent to it as well. Yeah. So what we want to have is the identity provider, and that those are the ones I talked about. It's a whole list of stuff, Gemma and Slack and so on and so forth. But we want to have like Azure Active Directory, and then I have a client ID like that. And I have a tenant ID. How do I that? No, don't want to have to. Yeah, I will paste it later and save directly because I don't want to have the tenant ID on the video then. But I have a resource that's okay because I will delete it either way. And my scope is test. And then I just need my client secret. Let me fetch it really quick because I have it in my last pass. And there we custom connector. Here we are. Close it. So here's my client secret, and so now I will paste the tenant ID and go to the next next page, just to don't have it on video. So do that really quick and go to definitions again. Here we are. Nope. And now it's on video. Okay, so here we are, definition, and that's basically everything we had to do. I've configured general and security and definition. So let's create this one. Perfect, and go to test then. So we have to create another connection now because it's a new connector. We don't have a connection yet. So let's do that. Now it should pop up a window exactly where I have to log in. So I will just select my user because I'm already logged in inside of my browser window. That's this one. And then usually it would ask for permissions for this API or app registration, but I gave my consent already, so that's why it's not showing. And then I can just test my operation. And here we are. It's freezing out here. Yeah, not quite, but it's obviously not my location that we have the weather information here. But yeah, that's so this connector is working as well. So we could now use this one in any of our Power Automate flows to get temperature from a certain location and save it somewhere or show it in the Canvas app, whatever. And then you see also some information. The item date is mismatching. Should be date time, and it's date string undefined, but it's just a warning, so that's fine. So now we've created two custom connectors, one against the public API and using API key, and one against a custom API, which, as I mentioned, could be like an API to create unique identifiers across all your applications or anything else. For example, a different ERP system where you want to integrate to, or whatever system it is. And this one is using an app registration. The setup of this was a bit complex, but I have a blog post about this specific demo or this specific use case. So having an own API in Azure DevOps, using app registration to authenticate, and having custom connector connect to this API using a different API registration or app registration, and how this one is set up and what you have to do in Azure DevOps and all the different permissions and so on and so forth. So if you're interested, then please take a look at that or contact me later. What I wanted to show now, it's a different preview feature, and it actually, when I done this demo yesterday and prepared a bit more, so it will crash my custom connector, but I want to show it to you either way, and Microsoft is aware of it, and I hope they will fix it soon. So let's take a look at that, and that's using environment variables in a custom connector, which is really good for ALM perspective. Sorry. So let's take a look at our solution. So I will just show one, and that's the host. So I have a custom connector, or I have a environment variable, which is the custom connector demo host, and that's what we were talking about earlier, like the host of your API you want to connect to, and those change between environments usually. So you want to have this one dynamically. And earlier it was like a bit magic here and there to get it working. It worked, but it was not as straightforward as it should be. And using environment variables makes it quite straightforward, I would say. But again, it's a preview image, preview function. You shouldn't use that in production yet. But let's do it either way. So you go to general. Here we have the host, and everything we have to do is paste in this little snippet here. And when I now save, it will basically know that it should take the value which is in the environment variable which has the schema name bb custom connector demo host. So this one, it's the same URL, but it's coming from a different place. So it's not hard coded, but it comes dynamically from an environment variable. So when you're deploying the solution to the next downstream environment, let's say it's test, while importing it, if you do it manually or via your pipeline, which should be the preferred way, you can set a value for your for the current value for the environment you are installing to, and it could be different to the one you had in your previous environment. So you could have like an URL to your test API, and then when you deploy to production, an URL to your production API. And if I save that or do an update connector, it will work. Oh, it won't. Oh, nice. Is that me? Okay, then we maybe use that, do that here as well. Let's see. A new error appeared. Good, good, good. Let's do that really quick. Hopefully that works. No, it doesn't. Weird. Okay, so okay, I'm not allowed to use the environment variables in custom connectors feature. That changed since yesterday. Okay, sorry for that. So it should basically take the environment variables values, which makes it better for LM as mentioned. But it would break my custom connector either way at the moment because it's some bug and it's a preview. So yeah, okay. Sorry about that. We can't test that now. There was one question. So the question is how to customize custom connector if I'm importing Postman collection and I'm only supposed to post data in URL encoded format, as we can only leverage body and JSON format here. So how I can achieve that by editing either Swagger definition or a code approach. Not sure spontaneously, so I would have to take a look at that, but feel free to reach out to me and we can set up something and take a look at that. So not a problem at all. Yeah, so now we have created those two. I have one more slide I wanted to show you, and that's the limitations. Let's go over to my slide deck again. Here we are. So the limitations are, or the ones I came across or know about, is the Swagger file you're importing, or the file of the connector is the max size is 1 megabyte. So if you have a really big API with a lot of endpoints, which sometimes happens, especially when you're creating custom connector for a third-party API, then this could happen. That's not allowed to have it more than 1 MB. Then you have to split it. So you could have different custom connectors to the same API, but different parts of the API, so to say. There is a limit on the amount of custom connectors you're allowed to create, and it depends on which license you have and in which environment you are, or what the custom connectors are for. Are they for Power Automate or Logic apps, for example? So the usual Dynamics license, if I remember correctly, was like 50 custom connectors, which is usually sufficient, but still with some limitations. Then the deployment can be a limitation. So at the moment, you have to deploy the custom connector before you deploy the flow, which is using the custom connector. So if they are both in the same solution, the import will crash because it tries to install the flow before it installed the custom connector, and then the flow has missing dependencies. So yeah, would have to have two solutions, one with custom connectors and one with flows, and deploy the custom connectors first. If you're using environment variables, which hasn't worked and again is preview still, then those environment variables they need to be in the same solution as the custom connector. Otherwise, you can install a custom connector because it has dependencies to those environment variables. Then other authentications could be a limitation. So one which we built earlier was none of those security or authentication methods, those 4 we had, were sufficient or were matching. So we had to do it in a different way. And there we had like an own action, which was create a token, basically, which requested a specific URL and with specific parameters.
Was kann ich für dich tun?
Sorry, that was my Siri. And so that was one way to come around that. Then environment variables, as mentioned, and as you have seen, they are preview, so don't use them in any production environment yet. And then environment variables are cached. So if you use environment variables in your custom connector and you change the value, you have to, I don't even know how that's working with custom connectors. For a Power Automate flow, you have to turn it off and on again because they are cached. I don't know how this should work with custom connectors, but we will see. Time will tell when they are in preview any longer. So that's basically what I had. So thanks for your attention, and here are my contact details again. So please feel free to reach out to me if you have any further questions, or write them in the chat. So I have like 4 minutes left. I'm happy to answer some stuff.
Thank you, Benedict. Wow, okay, you did cover a lot there. Okay, so the questions from the top, the first question is from Philip, asking, do you know if the OpenAPI 3.0 will be supported in the near future?
Yeah, as mentioned, I'm not aware of that. I hope so, but I don't have any information about that.
Tish is asking how to customize a custom connector if I'm importing Postman collections. I'm only supposed to post data in the URL encoded format, as we can only leverage body in JSON format here. So how can I achieve that by editing either Swagger definition or code approach?
Yeah, I spontaneously can't answer that. So I have to take a look at the API and a bit more in detail. So I'm pretty sure there is a way, but yeah, so feel free to reach out to me and we can take a look at that.
Yeah, great feedback from Sushma, saying very detailed and nice presentation. Coquelin saying great, thanks. Okay, I believe that's, yeah. So Benedict, it's always a great pleasure. Your sessions are always going down very, very well with the audience, because I feel your sessions, they speak on the level of the people on the ground, you know, busy with their, we use the term facing the coal of the development, and so they really appreciate your sessions, and they can really understand and tune into what you're exactly saying. So highly appreciate,
Thank you.
always appreciate your sessions, and again, great feedback from Tishka and Rachel and everyone else, Coquelin and everyone, Philip and everyone else. So Philippe is saying danke for den vordag. What does that mean? Sorry.
Thanks for the session, basically.
Thank you. Awesome. Fantastic. Well, thank you once again, Benedict. It's always a great pleasure.
Thank you.
And Benedict, just one more thing. Are you able to share your connection details in the chat so that the community can keep in touch with you?
Yeah, sure. I will do that. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. So your social media and your blog, I think they would really appreciate that.
Sure.
Fantastic. So that was Benedict joining us from Switzerland via Germany. So there you go. So we're now to the final session of the day. We are on the final session of the day, and it's